All right, I'll do it. What does it take for an ordinary man to change history, and for Hollywood to change itself in the process? Sergeant York wasn't just a patriotic war film. It was a moral battleground. Not a simple recruitment story, but a careful negotiation between faith, violence, truth, and myth. Behind the calm performance and steady narration, chaos brews, scripts collapse, politics loom, personal beliefs collide with studio pressure. The man at the center of the story nearly refuses to let it be made at all. This is a film shaped by hesitation, not certainty. In this video, we're revealing 20 weird facts about Sergeant York, the moments that never made it into the history books. And stay until the end, because the final revelation explains why this film could only be made once. Let's begin. Fact number 1. The real Alvin York. Almost stopped the film entirely. The movie exists only because one man allows it to, and for years, he doesn't. Alvin York refuses Hollywood outright. He distrusts studios. He distrusts spectacle. Most of all, he fears his life will be turned into noise. Not truth, but entertainment. What audiences didn't know is that negotiations last years. York demands control, script approval, moral clarity, no exaggeration, no mockery of faith. This isn't ego, it's protection. Only when he believes the film can serve as an example, not a glorification, does he agree. And even then, reluctantly. It wasn't a green light. It was a concession. Without that restraint, Sergeant York never happens, and Hollywood never gets its most complicated war hero. Fact number 2. Casting the lead is a moral test, not a talent search. Finding the star isn't about fame. It's about belief. Gary Cooper is chosen not because he looks like York, but because York trusts him. Quiet, reserved, unflashy, a man who listens more than he speaks. What audiences didn't know is that York personally approves Cooper, not after a screen test, but after observing his demeanor. This role demands restraint. No swagger, no triumphalism. The hero isn't loud. He's conflicted. It wasn't about acting range. It was about moral posture. Cooper doesn't play York as a legend. He plays him as a man weighing consequences. That choice defines the entire film and reshapes how war heroes are portrayed on screen. Fact number 3. The director walks a tightrope between faith and action. Howard Hawks thrives on momentum, speed, confidence. But here, he slows everything down. What audiences didn't know is how carefully Hawks balances belief with battle. Scenes linger. Decisions take time. Silence matters. This isn't accidental pacing. It's philosophical. Hawks understands the danger. Make York too violent, and the message collapses. Make him too passive, and the story loses gravity. So the film moves deliberately. Not urgency, but inevitability. It wasn't a war movie rushing toward conflict. It was a character study, walking toward an unavoidable choice. That restraint becomes its most radical element. Fact number 4. The script is rewritten to avoid simplistic patriotism. Early drafts don't survive. What audiences didn't know is how aggressively the script is softened, not weakened, but complicated. Lines are removed, speech is shortened, moral certainty trimmed. The goal isn't to rally, it's to question. Studio executives want clarity. York wants honesty. Hawks wants balance. So the script evolves into something rare for its time. A war story that hesitates. Not propaganda, but persuasion through doubt. The final version doesn't tell audiences what to think. It shows them the cost of thinking at all, and that hesitation gives the film its lasting power. Fact number 5. The training scenes are designed to feel uncomfortable. Military drills usually energize audiences. Here, they unsettle. What audiences didn't know is that these sequences are staged to feel rigid, repetitive, emotionally distant. No musical swell, no heroic framing. This isn't transformation through excitement. It's transformation through pressure. York doesn't thrive in uniform. He endures it. That choice reframes the entire journey. Training isn't liberation, it's confinement. And when York finally acts, it feels earned. Not because he's been shaped into a warrior, but because he's been forced to confront himself. Fact number 6. Combat is filmed with distance, not spectacle. The battle scenes refuse excess. What audiences didn't know is how deliberately Hawks avoids close-ups during moments of action. The camera often pulls back, observes, withholds. This isn't about thrills. It's about consequence. Shots land without flourish. Movements feel mechanical. The violence isn't celebrated, it's endured. Not chaos, but clarity. That choice aligns with York's inner conflict. He doesn't revel in action. He performs it grimly. The film isn't asking viewers to cheer. It's asking them to witness. Fact number 7. The famous battlefield feat is underplayed on purpose. York's most legendary moment is restrained. What audiences didn't know is how much is left out. No sweeping music, no triumphant pause. The action unfolds plainly, almost clinically. This isn't myth-making. It's documentation. Hawks understands something critical. Exaggeration would diminish the truth. So the moment plays as matter of fact. York acts. Others react. Then it's over. Not glory, but aftermath. That restraint makes the feat more powerful than any spectacle could. Fact number 8. The film avoids demonizing the enemy. Notice what's missing. What audiences didn't know is that opposing soldiers are rarely caricatured. No monstrous framing. No dehumanizing language. This is intentional. The conflict is framed as tragic necessity, not moral superiority. York's struggle isn't against people, it's against circumstance. That choice preserves the film's integrity. It refuses easy binaries, not good versus evil, but duty versus conscience. Few films of the era dare that balance. Fact number 9. Studio pressure nearly rewrites the ending. Executives want closure, certainty, applause. What audiences didn't know is how close the film comes to a more celebratory ending. York resists. Hawks resists. They insist the story must return to quiet, to reflection. Victory isn't the point. Return is. So, the ending softens. It exhales. Not triumph, but survival. That choice frustrates some, but defines the film's legacy. Fact number 10. The film releases at the exact moment America needs it. Timing is everything. What audiences didn't know is how closely the release aligns with global uncertainty. The film lands when audiences are anxious, conflicted, searching. Not reassurance, but orientation. And right here, go ahead and like and subscribe. Because this next section reveals how Sergeant York quietly reshaped Hollywood's idea of heroism forever. The film doesn't shout answers. It models contemplation. That makes it resonate far beyond its runtime. Fact number 11. Gary Cooper's performance redefines masculinity. Cooper doesn't dominate scenes. He absorbs them. What audiences didn't know is how radical that was. Strength through restraint. Authority through listening. Not bravado, but conviction. This performance shifts expectations. Heroes no longer need volume. They need clarity. That influence echoes for decades. Cooper wins acclaim not for intensity, but for stillness. And Hollywood takes notes. Fact number 12. The film shapes public memory of World War I. For many viewers, this becomes the image of the war. What audiences didn't know is how much responsibility that carries. The film simplifies geography, but complicates motivation. It doesn't define the war, it defines the cost of participation. That framing influences how audiences remember history: personal, moral, unresolved. Not strategy, but consequence. Fact number 13. Alvin York uses the film to fund education. York's involvement isn't passive. What audiences didn't know is that he directs proceeds toward building schools. Education over celebration. The film becomes a means, not an end. That choice reinforces the story's core message. Legacy isn't fame, it's service. And the film quietly practices what it preaches. Fact number 14. Religious themes are carefully balanced, not preached. Faith is present, but it never overwhelms the frame. What audiences didn't know is how deliberately religious language is reduced during development. Early drafts contain more explicit declarations, more verbal certainty. Those lines are quietly removed. What remains is behavior, hesitation, choice. York's belief is never delivered as instruction. It's revealed through restraint, through pauses before action, through the weight he carries after decisions are made. The film refuses to sermonize. It trusts viewers to recognize conviction without explanation. Not belief as performance, but belief as burden. This balance matters. It allows faith to exist without demanding agreement. Reflection replaces resistance. Meaning emerges organically rather than forcefully. That restraint is why the film continues to resonate across generations. It doesn't ask audiences to adopt York's beliefs. It asks them to understand his struggle. And that distinction gives the film durability rather than doctrine. Fact number 15. The cinematography favors naturalism over drama. Nothing in the frame insists on importance. Lighting is soft. Framing is stable. Movement is minimal. What audiences didn't know is how intentional that restraint is. The film actively avoids visual flourish. No exaggerated angles. No dramatic shadows demanding attention. This isn't visual understatement by accident. It's visual discipline. The camera behaves like a witness, not a participant. It observes events without guiding emotion. Scenes unfold without visual cues, telling audiences what to feel or when to react. Not spectacle, but trust. That choice aligns perfectly with the story's humility. York isn't elevated above his environment. He exists within it, equal to it, grounded by it. The result is a film that feels honest rather than impressive. And that honesty allows moments of weight to land without manipulation, quietly, firmly, and with lasting impact. Fact number 16. The film changes how biographies are told. Before this film, screen biographies glorify achievement. After it, they interrogate motivation. What audiences didn't know is how Sergeant York quietly rewrites the formula. The narrative doesn't race toward accomplishment. It lingers on hesitation. Doubt comes first. Action follows later. This structure becomes influential. The story asks, not what York does, but why he resists doing it. Inner conflict occupies more space than public success. Decisions matter more than outcomes. Not destiny, but decision. Later biographical films borrow this approach. Character before accomplishment. Internal struggle before external recognition. The hero's uncertainty becomes the story's engine. That shift matters. It humanizes legends. It reframes history as a series of difficult choices rather than inevitable triumphs. In that sense, Sergeant York doesn't just tell a life story. It redefines how lives are portrayed on screen. Fact number 17. The movie avoids turning York into a symbol. Symbols simplify. People don't. What audiences didn't know is how actively the film resists reducing York to an emblem. He isn't portrayed as flawless or unwavering. He questions himself. He contradicts himself. He changes slowly. This isn't indecision, it's honesty. The film refuses to lock him into a single meaning. York is never used to represent an abstract idea. He remains personal, contextual, specific. Not an icon, but a person. That choice protects the story from flattening into propaganda. Symbols inspire briefly, people endure. By allowing York to remain uncertain, the film invites empathy rather than agreement. Viewers aren't asked to admire him blindly. They're asked to understand him. That humanity is the film's safeguard. It prevents myth from replacing memory and ensures the story remains grounded long after the era that produced it has passed. Fact number 18. Critics initially miss the film's subtlety. Early responses focus on surface meaning, patriotism, timing, message. What audiences didn't know is how long it takes for critics to recognize the film's restraint. Immediate reactions emphasize what the film appears to support, not how carefully it avoids certainty. Subtlety often hides in plain sight. Only with distance does the deeper structure become visible. The hesitation, the moral ambiguity, the refusal to simplify conflict. Time reveals what immediacy obscures. As years pass, reassessment begins. The film is no longer viewed as a statement, but as a meditation. Not a declaration, but a negotiation between belief and duty. That shift elevates its reputation. What once seemed straightforward becomes complex. What seemed safe becomes quietly daring. The film doesn't change. Perspective does. And that delayed recognition becomes part of its legacy. Fact number 19. Its influence extends beyond war films. The impact doesn't stop at genre boundaries. What audiences didn't know is how widely this film's tone travels. Stories about conscience, responsibility, personal restraint. The influence spreads quietly, without credit or announcement. Later dramas adopt its pacing, its refusal to rush decisions, its emphasis on inner reckoning over external spectacle, not louder but deeper. You can see it in films about leadership, About moral crossroads. About individuals navigating forces larger than themselves. The DNA isn't visual, it's structural. Sergeant York teaches filmmakers that tension doesn't require constant escalation. That silence can carry weight. That restraint can feel braver than excess. Its influence isn't obvious, but it's everywhere. Embedded in stories that choose thoughtfulness over certainty and character over convenience. Fact number 20. The film could not be remade the same way. Context is everything. What audiences didn't know is how dependent this film is on its moment. Its tone relies on restraint. Its power comes from understatement. Modern filmmaking instincts would overwhelm it. Today's tools encourage expansion, amplification, explanation. This story requires the opposite. A contemporary remake would demand faster pacing, louder moments, clearer messaging, and in doing so, it would lose what makes the original endure. Not scale, but sincerity. The film survives because it refuses to compete for attention. It waits. It trusts. It allows space for thought. That approach is rare now, and nearly impossible to reproduce, honestly. Sergeant York doesn't just belong to history. It depends on it. Sergeant York endures not because it celebrates war, but because it questions it. Not because it offers answers, but because it respects doubt. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden story behind the screen, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks they already know this film. Because some legends aren't loud. They're careful, and that makes all the difference.